Hey, what's up everybody? So I guess this night is turning into a night of me just recording a bunch of videos. I've recorded 2 so far about using Tone.js and CodePen to make sound in a web browser, and I figured I might as well do something that's like not super boring. So here is the final master course on how to make something not boring using JavaScript and CodePen. What we're going to do is we are going to make something that makes noise. I'm not entirely sure yet, but is a little bit cooler than just a boring looking thing. So as I said before, Tone.js is the main library that we're going to be using here. That gives us access to the web audio API. The prior videos talked a little bit more in detail about what Tone.js does and how to get started with it. I'm just going to assume you watch that, not because I feel good about you watching it, but just because it would be a waste of time. Kind of like me talking right now. So we're going to get started here, and we're going to create a new pen on CodePen. And the first thing we are going to do is add Tone.js. Doink. Because we need Tone.js, and whoops, we're gonna make this private for now. Maybe we'll publish it later so that you can check it out. And then we're gonna do the old console.clear. All right, so what I was thinking more or less that we should do is create an instrument where we have a loop playing, and the notes it's playing change based on when we tell it to. So it'll be like a automatic instrument that plays notes, and then we change those notes by telling it to change the notes it's playing. And so the first thing we're gonna do, I think, is structure the HTML for this. So we're gonna do we'll just call it it'll be a header, and inside of that header, we are going to have a unordered list, and let's say we can change it to 5 different sets of notes. We'll have 5 notes that it can fool around with here. So we're going to have 5 different controls, and we'll start it off by saying we'll create the labels for the elements that will be our controls. So label for, my F key is a little effed up, for chord 1, and it'll just be a number 1, and then we'll just use the power of duplication to do this. All right, so we have 3 labels and a header in a list, and boy does that look boring. And then what we're going to do is we are going to create some inputs here, and I'm going to use multi-line selection to make that less of a pain in the ass. ID, input. Everything's really great until you don't know how to type, and then everything isn't great. And we're going to say the type equals radio, and in order to group them, you need to provide a name. And so I'm going to just name them chord, crod, chord. And what this does is it means only one of these inputs can be selected at a time. And so if I select this one, and then this one, and then this one, I can't select more than one. The reason I made labels for those is that I can click these labels, and the labels check the thing that we're trying to check. Got it? So I'm going to hit save here. And let's dig into our CSS. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to say input position absolute, and then left equals negative a ton of pixels, and body overflow hidden. And actually, you know what? We'll drop them into the header here because we don't need to be outside of the header for this. What I want to do is I'm going to style the labels based on whether or not the input is checked and not even look at the input because we don't want to look at this ugly stuff here. So I'm going to change this to header overflow hidden and then header inputs position absolute left negative 9,999. All right, so that should get those out of the way. The cool thing is since we're in Sass, we can use some logic here for iteration. One thing I could do is I could say, we're gonna set this first one to be checked. So the first one will default as checked. And what I can say is, and chord 1, so the one that has the ID of chord 1, what comes after it, that's a tilde, which you may or may not be able to see. What comes after it is a UL. So we're going to say UL, and then we'll say label for chord 1, background red. So what this is going to do is it is going to say the input, the next, anything that comes after it at the same level in the HTML, like same indentation, find a UL, then inside of that UL, find the label for chord 1 and make it red. Now right now that's going to be the case no matter whether or not it's checked, but what I can do is I can say only when it is checked, do that. So if we run this, it'll be that because we defaulted it to checked, but as soon as I check something else, it's no longer red. But if I check it, by clicking the label, it makes it red. It's pretty handy. Since we're in Sass, we can use iteration. So at for I from 1 through 5, and instead of chord 1, we just need to say chord I. And then we insert the same thing here. And so what this should do is whichever one is checked, find the label for that one and color it. And so without having to do any JavaScript at all, since these are the sibling of the list that these are inside of, we can actually just use CSS to do this styling here. We're not going to make it background red, but it's good to know that we can do that. So first thing I'm going to do is reset some of the style here. List style is none on the UL, margin is 0, padding is 0, and then I'm going to say display flex, and then each LI is going to flex 1 and have text align center. Well, I'll do label text align center and display block and cursor pointer. So here we go. So right now our labels are the full width of that red area, which means if we click them, we get some nice cool stuff here. So I'm going to pad this up a bit, 0.5 rem, whatever, we'll just say 0.5 rem, and we'll say the background is black, the color is white, and up here, the label, when it's active, the background will be tomato. Cool. So right now we are checking boxes. If I go in here, yikes, if I go in here and I inspect this bad boy, I can disable the left position of these radios here. And so we can see that this is still working here. So anyways, checked state of input. We can end up using pseudo selectors and combinators like the tilde to find things that come after our checked radios to style that with CSS. Anyways, that's cool thing number 1. If I rerun this, it'll reset our overrides. So the first thing we're going to need to do is say we need to find our inputs. Document.query selector all input, and I'm also going to just say here that these have a value because we need that. So the value is whichever chord they are. Array.from inputs. This is one thing about query selector all, is that it's not truly an array, and so you can do array.from the result of a query selector all to get an array, so that I can do something like for each, and then we'll say input, and then we can say input.add event listener change. So whenever the input changes, if input.checked, because that's the only time we care is when it changes to checked, console.log input.value. And so whenever we check one, we should get a number here. 2, 3, 4, 1, 5, 2, and so on. So this is working. This is great. So what we can do is say handle chord, and that'll just take the value. And whatever, I had an idea, but we'll just deal with it when we come to it. Value string, that's important to note that it's going to be a string at that point. And we can just console.log parse int value string, and we'll get an integer this time when that happens. So let's run it. Yeah, so now see they're purple. It means we're getting an integer at that point. Cool. So right now we are changing our chords, except there's no chords yet. So what we're going to want to do is come up with the idea of chords. So a chord, we're going to need 5 of these, but inside of them there will be multiple notes. So what I'm going to do is we'll do A4. Okay, this is another thing that some of you might hate, but I'm going to be super cool about it. I'm going to just space separate instead of creating a subarray. I'm going to create a string, and then when it comes time, I will, you'll see in a second. So we'll do A4, C5, and then E5. That's a minor chord starting at A4. Then we'll do a F4, A4, C5. That's an F major. And then we'll do a G4, B4, D4, D5, which should be a G major. And then let's get something fun in there. Well, let's keep it sad. D4, F4, A4, that's a D minor. And then, what should we do? EGB? Yeah, we'll do E4, G4, B4. That would be a E minor, E major. Gosh, whatever, doesn't matter. So we have 5 chords here. Pardon my not knowing what I'm doing. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to run this one time. So I'm going to map those chords as we're going to take that string, and we're just going to return string.split space. So this is really dumb, but basically what I'm doing is, in order to be lazy, instead of writing all of the strings in individual arrays, I am writing them as strings, then in the definition mapping them as arrays. So if I console.log chords. Cool thing is this only runs, it only has to do this one time. So we can see that chords at the time of load actually maps them as arrays for us, which is like, in my mind, a little bit more legible and whatever. Maybe I'm being too dumb, but I prefer to write stuff like this when I can. It's just the inner Rubyist in me. Okay, so we have our 5 chords. And so now what we need is a player. And so to do that, we'll just do tone.transport.schedule repeat. And inside of that, we'll just call a repeat on repeat function. And we'll tell it to loop every 8th note, not 8 measures, 8th note. And then function on repeat. And remember, we get time there. And so what we're going to want to do here is we are going to want to find the current chord, then the current note in the chord, the current chord, the current note in the chord, and then play it. So first things first, we need to like define the idea of the current chord, which instead of storing as the contents of the chord, we'll just store as an index, and it'll be the index of the chords array. So we'll call it chord IDX, and we'll set it to 0. So let chord equal chord index, chords, chord index. So that'll find the chord. Then we'll do let note equal chord step modulo 3, because there's 3 notes per chord. We haven't defined step yet. We'll get to that. And then we step plus plus at the end of it. And we will synth.trigger attack release note for an 8th note at the current time. So we need to define 2 things here. We need a synth and we need a step. So the step will be 0. That's covered. And then down here, I'm just going to const synth equals new tone dot synth. And we need to connect that to master. And synth.oscillator.type equals sine. We're not going to use the default. We're going to set it to be a sine wave ourselves. Cool. So when we start the transport, we should just be playing that first chord over and over again. So tone.transport.start. And we got an error. Never works the first time. Step is read only because I defined it as a const. Of course, we're going to have that problem down here too. Var. Computer's bugging out. Let's do this again. All right, that's a little loud. So you might remember that we have access to gain nodes equals new tone.gain, and we'll set it to 0.6, and then we'll connect this gain to master, synth connect gain. All right, that won't be as loud now. We can test that. All right, that's better. So I'm gonna refresh. Okay, so now we have that loop happening. Now there's 2 things that we could do here. Right now we have this event listener listening for when this thing changes. And we can either, let's just do it. Chord index, that's the one it's using right there. And that's what we want to map to these 5 buttons. So handle chord, we're going to say that the integer is parse int the string. That'll be 1 through 5, but we want that to be 0 through 4 because it's referring to the position in an array. So we'll just say that minus 1. And all we need to do actually, we don't even need to set it here. Chord index equals parse int value string minus 1. So we have to start our thing here. Cool, so we're changing the chords. We're changing the chords, which is pretty awesome. And from there, we can do a couple different things. One thing that I would propose is I think what we should do is make it more than just 3 notes. We should make it 6 notes first of all, and so to do that, we will do a little thing here. I'm going to normalize these values. So 4 will be our base. So 4 will be 0, 5 will be 1. So if I just Command D here, I can change all the 5s to 1, and then all the 4s to 0. And so then in our map function, instead of mapping them strictly as split, we're just going to do format chords. Format trods, crods, format chords. There we go. And down here at the bottom, function format chords, and it's going to take that chord string and so we will say chord string equals, we'll do let chord equal the chord string split space. So that'll give us our array of strings, A0, comma, C1, comma, E1, etc. in an array. So that's our chord. Then what we are going to do is say, we're going to define an array here. And since we want 6 notes, we're going to do 2 loops over the 3. So for let I equals 0, I is less than 2, so that'll be 2 times I plus plus. Then we want to loop over each item in the chord. So for let j equals 0, j is less than chord dot length, j plus plus. And then we are going to get let the note octave, because it's the letter of the note and then the octave of the note, but it's relative. So we're just going to do, since it's going to be 2 letters, all we need to do is just say chord j dot split. Nothing. So that'll put the A, it'll create an array A and 0. So array dot push note, and we haven't defined it yet, so let note equal, we'll just do note octave 0. So that'll just be the letter. And then if note oct 1, the number, is equal to 0 as a string, then note plus equals I, that's the octave loop, plus 4. Let's just set let val equal, if it's equal to 0, it's I plus 4. ternary operator, else it's I plus 5. And then note plus equals, we'll just call it oct instead of val because that makes way more sense. So what we're doing is we're saying if that item, if this 0 right here is a 0, right up here, if that's a 0, I, which the first time through is 0, second time through is 1, we want it to be octave 0 plus 4, which would be 4. The next time around, if it's 0, we want it to be 1 plus 4, which is 5. If it's equal to 1, not 0, that's this last bit, we want it to be plus 5. And so you'll see what this looks like in a second. So I'm going to just return this array, save it, and when I look at chords here, console.log chords, that logic, instead of us writing everything out like normal human beings, we created a program that goes A4, C5, E5, A5, C6, E6. So what that does is it gives us the ability to programmatically create based on these little triads of information and their relative octave, which is 0 relative to 4 and then 1 relative to 4. It allows us to dynamically create these crazier chord patterns and chord structures. So I know it seems a little over the top, but down the line, this will make things easier. Seems unnecessary, I know. So let's listen to what this sounds like. Oh, we got a problem here. We're only going through 3. So what we want to do is do chord.length. That's kind of hurting my ears here. All right, we're going to bring that gain down to like a 2. Actually, you know what? It's probably just my volume. That's the problem. My bad. That was probably totally normal for you. I'm going to put that back at a 7. I'm going to manage my own volume like an adult human being. Cool. All right, so we've created this looper here where we can change the chords. Which is pretty great. Now let's say we wanted to speed things up. So there's 2 things to think about here. Are we talking about just speeding up the tempo, or are we talking about the frequency of notes per beat? We could double this effectively by making these 16th notes and then making the notes play for a 16th note. And that will effectively double the speed. When we start this puppy up, we should create a button to do that. Oh, shoot. That just got crazy. Holy Lord. Okay, cool. Goodness, I thought we lost our life there. I'm gonna have to go back and see what I typed wrong. But that was like way 16th note. 16th note. Is that really going to do it again? Let's try it. Okay, there we go. See, the internet's not hard. Coding's easy. All right, so what we've done here is we've doubled our stuff. I'm gonna do this. I'm just gonna close this console. Video. I'm going to give a header. So let's go up here and let's say HTML body height equals 100%, header height equals 100%, and UL height equals 100%. Come now. Li flex 1. There we go. And if we want, we can do display flex. Flex direction is column to vertically center the content. Justify content center. Align content center. And then font size equals 3 rem. And then li plus li, border left 4 pixels solid, something like this, I don't know. There we go, and we'll just do whatever, we'll leave it. Maybe not 333. We really care about our grayscale here. Okay. So now we have this instrument that we've made that will arpeggiate and change the chords. I think what I'm going to do, bpm.value equals 90. All right, cool. So that's it. That's a cooler looking instrument thing. Hope you enjoyed it. Keep coding. Sorry, this got long.